Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into what I'd honestly call an absolute accidental masterpiece. We're heading all the way back to 1889 to check out a travelogue that was originally supposed to be this super serious educational history of the River Thames. But instead, it unintentionally became one of the greatest, most relatable comedic books of all time. Jerome K Jerome's Three Men in a Boat. Look, if you've ever gone on a vacation with your friends that just went hilariously, catastrophically wrong, you are going to find this explainer incredibly validating. Let's get right into it. Now, to really get the genius of this story, we have to look at how it starts. And this brilliantly sets the tone for the whole journey. Our narrator, Jay, who's actually based on the author himself, is feeling a little under the weather. So naturally, he goes to the British Museum Library to look up a minor ailment in a medical dictionary. But as he's flipping through the pages, he just goes down this hilarious rabbit hole. By the time he finishes reading, he is utterly convinced he's dying of cholera, gout, mumps, and basically every other devastating scourge known to man. Well, except for one, housemaid's knee. I mean, it's literally the 19th century equivalent of going on WebMD with a mild headache and leaving completely convinced you have 3 days to live. Section 1. A Victorian WebMD spiral. Hypochondria strikes.
But here's the thing, Jay doesn't suffer alone. He meets up with his buddies, George and William Samuel Harris, only to find out they're also convinced they're terribly ill. The three of them are just sitting around Jay's room, smoking and comparing their totally imaginary maladies. George feels dizzy. Harris feels dizzy. Jay's liver is out of order. And tagging along with them is the fourth member of the party, Montmorency the dog, who honestly just looks deeply suspicious of the whole situation.
And actually, speaking of Montmorency, we really need to understand what kind of dog we're dealing with here. First off, he's entirely fictional, but more importantly, he's a fox terrier. Back in the 19th century, fox terriers weren't just cute little lap dogs. They were known as brave, highly aggressive rat killers. People literally held rat-killing competitions back then. So Montmorency isn't just a sweet, cuddly pet. He's this menacing, chaotic force of nature who absolutely loves a good fight. And that perfectly sets up his hilarious personality for the rest of the trip. So what's the cure for all these phantom ailments? Well, they read a medical circular and diagnose themselves with the ultimate 19th century affliction, a general disinclination to work. Jay actually claims he's been a total martyr to it since boyhood, though, back then adults just called it being lazy and gave him a clump on the head. But now, as highly sophisticated adults, they decide the only proper medical cure for their sheer exhaustion from doing absolutely nothing is a restorative, fresh air boat trip up the River Thames. Section 2. Misadventures on the Thames, a journey of chaos. Okay, let's dive into this reality check. The Victorian expectation of a river holiday was so highly romanticized, right? Fresh air, the changing scenery occupying their minds, restorative sleep under a fair canopy of the English sky. Sounds great. The reality? Absolutely brutal. Instead of serene nature, they stumble upon a dead sheep floating in their drinking water. Instead of peaceful wildlife, they're battling violently aggressive swans. And instead of a smooth, relaxing journey, they just get hopelessly, completely lost. And this chaos perfectly sets up one of the absolute funniest anecdotes of the trip, the Hampton Court Maze. So Harris decides he wants to show off. He buys a map, studies it, and confidently declares the maze to be absurdly simple. He says you just keep turning to the right. He goes in and actually tells this lost group of people, including a poor woman holding a baby who's been trapped in there all morning, to just follow his lead. Bit by bit, he picks up an entire mob of desperate tourists. And they wander hopelessly for miles. Every single time they think they're finally out, boom, they end up right back in the middle. Eventually, the mob turns on him, and Harris is left battered in both spirit and pride. Then there's the infamous swan incident. One evening, Harris is left alone on the island to settle his stomach with a hot toddy. The next morning, he claims he was attacked by a massive flock of swans. First, he tells them there were 8 of them. Then, suddenly, it was 14. Then he claims he fought 18 swans for 3 hours straight using a single oar. When his friends press him on it, he indignantly asks if they think he's fighting 30 swans. The sheer absurdity of his wildly changing, deeply exaggerated numbers perfectly captures the essence of that one friend we all have who utterly refuses to admit they just got spooked in the dark. But honestly, the absolute pinnacle of human frustration has to be the pineapple incident. It goes like this. Step 1, they find a tin of pineapple, and suddenly they crave it more than anything else in the world. They're dreaming of its syrupy, firm, clean taste. Step 2, they realize they forgot the can opener. The desperation just escalates from there. Step 3, they try to break into it using a rock, and then they literally start beating it with an oar. They pound this tin until it is mangled into a twisted, mocking shape.
Finally, bruised, bleeding, and totally defeated, Harris imagines the tin is leering at him like the devil itself, and he just flings it as far as he can into the river. It's just a masterclass in comedic exaggeration.
Section 3. The Accidental Comedy Masterpiece. A Comedy is Born.
You know, the actual creation of this book completely mirrors the chaos of their trip. Back in 1889, Jerome K Jerome intended to write a highly serious educational history of the Thames, complete with Roman encampments and the Magna Carta. He decides to write the humorous relief sections first. But his editor takes one look at the manuscript, realizes the historical bits are terribly boring, and promptly just throws out all the serious stuff. The editor kept only the humorous relief, and just like that, an accidental comedy masterpiece was born.
We really have to put this in context to understand why it exploded in popularity. During the Victorian age, millions of people were flooding into grimy, polluted industrial cities. The highbrow literary critics, they passionately hated Three Men in a Boat. They damned it for its lowbrow language and its lazy, neurotic protagonists. But the everyday public, they absolutely adored it. It sold in the millions, because it tapped perfectly into that ordinary working-class desire to just escape the smog of the city and go on a completely unpretentious holiday in the countryside.
And that whole attitude is just perfectly captured in this legendary quote from the book, "I like work, it fascinates me. I can sit and look at it for hours." The high society critics were like, who on earth would want to read about a narrator who says something so lazy? But the answer was, literally everybody. After slaving away in 19th century factories or stuffy offices, the public found a protagonist who openly celebrated dodging work to be deeply, endlessly relatable. It's a joke that lands just as perfectly today as it did over 130 years ago.
Section 4. The Enduring Power of Friendship. Shared Miseries.
So why are we still reading and talking about this story today? Because beneath all the absurdities, the hypochondria, the dead sheep, the completely inedible stews made of leftovers and river water, there lies a genuinely timeless study of human nature. Jay, George, and Harris bicker constantly. They complain. They try to weasel out of doing the rowing. But at the end of the day, when they are huddled together in a wet boat in the freezing rain, they still share this profound, deep fondness for one another. It's ultimately a story of forgiveness among deeply flawed friends.
And I want to leave you with this thought as we wrap up. Think about your own most chaotic group vacation. You know the one where the rental car broke down, or you got horribly lost, or it just poured rain the entire time. In the moment, it was miserable. But looking back, didn't those shared miseries and ridiculous absurdities only make your friendship stronger? Three Men in a Boat endures because it reminds us that our very worst misadventures almost always make for our very best stories. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to go check out the source material for yourself.